I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I am Sunil Dasgupta. The 2022 midterm elections, also known in Maryland as the 2022 gubernatorial elections, are over, to widespread relief that there was no actual violence. In Maryland, as expected but still historic, Wes Moore became the new Democratic governor, the first black man in the state to hold that position, and only the third black man to be governor of any state in the history of the United States. His lieutenant governor will be Aruna Miller, the first Indian American woman to hold statewide office in Maryland. Montgomery County races are mostly as expected. As of November 10th, counting continues in Maryland's Congressional District 6. Incumbent Democrat David Trone has been trailing Republican Neil Parrott by a few thousand votes, but Trone is expected to win a significantly higher number of yet-to-be-counted mail-in ballots. After polls closed on November 8th, Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee threw a party at a Gaithersburg bar where I met Democratic volunteer Abi Green. As I talked to her, it struck me that so much of politics, and especially electioneering, is carried on the shoulders of campaign workers, the thousands of staff and the tens of thousands of volunteers who knock on doors, make calls, show up at events, and generate the buzz around their candidates. Abi Green had been a volunteer for the David Trone campaign the last few weeks, but in the primary elections in the summer, she had been a campaign manager for Montgomery County Council candidate from District 7, Jacqueline Manger. These are not glam jobs, but mostly involve grunt work, and Abi told me she had been doing it for more than 20 years. Next morning, I called and asked her if she will share her story. I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society moving precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from A Shrewdness of Apes, a Washington, D.C. area progressive rock band that has been a finalist for the local Whammy Awards in the hard rock category for a number of years. Ian Mabley on vocals and guitar, Chris Shadow on vocals and bass, and J.R. Franks on the drums. More information on their website, asoaband.com. You're listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. In the news this week, Maryland voters overwhelmingly approved recreational use of marijuana in the state. Maryland becomes the first state to allow recreational use in the Mid-Atlantic. The closest other states with recreational use are Massachusetts and Michigan. Apart from being the first in the region to set up marijuana infrastructure, the underlying law will also expunge marijuana possession arrests and enable reconsideration of sentences for those doing time. Democrats are generally happy with the results across the state, except possibly the close race in the state's 6th congressional district, where incumbent Democrat and billionaire businessman David Trone's fate remains undecided as late as Thursday afternoon, November 10th. This is almost 2 days after the elections. The district had been adjusted after the 2020 census and a state Supreme Court order that compelled the Maryland General Assembly to reconsider the congressional maps it had proposed. The redistricting removed a part of liberal and Democratic Montgomery County from the district, but left in place conservative and Republican Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington counties. Frederick County, the second most populous jurisdiction in the district, then became the linchpin. If Frederick voted Democratic, Trone would surely remain. But Frederick, Dan Cox's home county, is seeing something of a Republican sweep. Beyond the congressional race, Michael Howe, who likes to diss on Montgomery County as crime-ridden and overcrowded, won the county executive race. The 7-member county council will go from Democratic to Republican control, with 5 council members now Republican. With the state's attorney who has long been a Republican, Frederick is now a red county, even though the city of Frederick, the seat of county government, remains solidly blue. Frederick is a little bit like Florida, where demographic change the last couple of decades had pushed the jurisdiction to purple, but contentious politics seem to have pushed the county back into red. Frederick has been a strong base for Moms for Liberty, the right-wing group which is believed to have helped Glenn Youngkin become the governor of Virginia. Not surprisingly, school board politics in Frederick have become heated. The advent of Trump politics, more generally in Maryland, by way of Dan Cox and Andy Harris in District 1 on the shore, means that local politics in the counties for councils and school boards are likely to become more contentious. Further north in Carroll County, a conservative slate defeated the liberal one backed by the local teachers union. The Carroll County Board of Education recently banned pride flags from its schools. Even in overwhelmingly liberal and Democratic Montgomery County, 2 conservative candidates, Mike Erickson and Esther Wells, won enough votes in the primary elections to reach the general. They lost, but worth pointing out the presence of other far-right candidates in the primary, suggesting growing contestation in local races. In conceding the election, Dan Cox thanked Trump and underscored his own belief in Trump's vision of America first. What happens when political temperature rises? Most political types will tell you that wedge issues drive voter interest and participation. Political contestation is also associated with frustration with the cozy inside politics local elections and governance can often be. With the state going into one-party rule, expect more contestation, especially at the local level, as Republicans try in a different venue to harness the anti-establishment energy. On the left, the 2022 elections suggest the return of the Apple ballot. The power of the once mighty Apple ballot, the teachers' union recommendation for local and state offices, had waned. This year, however, the state and local union endorsed Wes Moore over former Labor Secretary and former Montgomery County Council member Tom Perez. This support would have been critical in the primary. The general elections was a starker and clearer choice. If you look down ballot, and especially at the Board of Education race, you will see this more clearly. Apple ballot candidate Julie Yang won big against incumbent Scott Joftis, who had replaced Pat O'Neill after her death. Joftis had been endorsed by the Washington Post and by prominent Democratic politicians, including Jamie Raskin. And former school teacher Valerie Cole nearly beat school board president Brenda Wolf. What should we expect from a new Moore administration? The honeymoon of one party rule never lasts long. The General Assembly and Governor Moore have some common priorities, including funding the education initiatives known as the Blueprint for Maryland's Future and the Build to Learn Acts. But there are differences as well. In the campaign, Moore both supported and opposed highway expansion. The Assembly tends not to like highways, especially after Governor Hogan's expansive highway projects in Montgomery County. The Assembly's Spending Affordability Committee is expected to issue guidelines November 15th, and the legislative session starts January 11th. The governor-elect's transition team is likely working double time, but it'll take a Herculean effort to put a budget together by the third week of January. The immediate upshot might be a greater willingness on the part of the new governor's administration to agree with the legislature's priorities. But I have learned never to take this for granted. What makes things somewhat different this year in the state is Maryland's extraordinary $2 billion budget surplus. Let me repeat that. Not a deficit, but a surplus of $2 billion. And the state is expected to remain in the black for a handful more years. The extra money could mean an Oprah moment where everyone gets a new car. But equally, spending priorities are not clearly established at this moment. You're listening to I Hate Politics. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. I'll be back with campaign worker Abi Green to talk about the joys and challenges of this difficult work. Abi Green, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Thank you so much for having me.
Today is November 9th. Yesterday was the midterm elections, and you have been in the thick of it all through the election season. What does the morning after feel like?
I'm relieved, first and foremost. What I have to say personally, I've done campaign work since I was a wee little feminist in high school. And this was the most concerned I was that possibly something bad might happen on that day. Something violent, something, I don't know. It just felt different this round. Mm-hmm. So that was always my biggest fear. And my second is the races, both in the state and across the country, that I felt were the most important did go the way we wanted. So I feel good about that.
Okay. So tell me, what did you do? What all campaigns you worked on in this last season, and in what roles? How did you get to them?
Sure. Well, like I met you at a bar. My friend, babysitter to my child, but also the bartender at the restaurant around the corner, wanted to run for county council. She called me out of nowhere one night during COVID. You remember, if we were all really down and out and what are we doing with our lives and what's happening? And she said, you have been chattering on about politics for years. And it finally clicked. Like, if I don't do something, it's not going to change. This is a single mother with four children. She did not. Her name is Kim Kellerman. She did not stay in the race very long. And then just through a random link on LinkedIn, I found Jacqueline Manger's campaign. And I believe you interviewed her back during the primary. So she was running for this brand new seat against another previous guest of yours, Don Lukey, and some other folks. And that was the first time in my career that I've been a campaign manager. And the thing about being a campaign manager is if you win, you're not going to get any of the credit. And if you lose, it's 100% your fault. It's almost like being a parent. Like, there's no, okay, now you're off the hook. No, you're kind of always responsible for your kids, and you love them and you think about them, and it's part of you.
Well, let me ask you, when you describe campaign manager job as a parent, how do you think candidates feel about that?
I mean, I don't care. I don't. I mean, I think candidates need to absolutely be in this one lane.
Talk a little bit about your past, what other campaigns you've worked on.
I really started getting involved when I was at a new school in high school, and the very pretty popular girl turned around and said, "Hey, can you go to my mom's rally tomorrow? I have to go to the SATs and I need younger people to go." And when the pretty smart, cool girl asks you something, you say yes. Well, that was Stacy Shaheen.
That's very feminist of you.
It is. I'm being honest. I was 15. I was new to a school, right? She's also a brilliant lawyer. And yeah, I was right to think she was super cool still to this day. That was now Senator Shaheen. And she was running for governor for the first time. And I literally turned to Stacy and said, moms can't be governors because moms never had been. No woman had ever been governor of New Hampshire. And I went and I was so inspired because she was, and it's so funny to say this now, she was just a mom. She didn't look like this person that, she's very professional, all that, but she came from the teaching world. She's just my friend's mom and she could be governor.
In the campaign world, there's a difference, I think, between volunteers and paid campaign workers. So when did you go from being a volunteer to being a paid campaign worker? When did that happen for you?
2002, 20 years ago was my first paid job. And we were running against Mitt Romney. I was working for a candidate for governor. We did not win. Mitt Romney became governor. If you get a paid job on a campaign when you're entry level, it's not going to pay well. In this work, aside from obviously it's important what's in your pocketbook, right? But the people who do this do it for the love of it. So most of the time, it would be difficult for you to tell who are the staff and who are the awesome volunteers. It's always good to tell who the bad volunteers are, but
that's right.
The good volunteers, I say, treat them like staff until they say no, because that's how much we have to rely on them.
If you want to do political work, well, as a volunteer, which seems to be the first step, you have to have your own money and you have to have your own resources. Otherwise, I can't see how a kid from a low-income family is going to have the luxury to be able to do volunteer work for anybody.
There was a guy named Howard Dean that ran for president back in 2004 that had a really good run. And just structurally speaking, built the structure in New Hampshire and the other primary states that Barack Obama stood on, and the same people that worked for them. But yeah, until then, it was an all white kids game. It was a rich white kids game. Oh, hey, yeah, your parents can just pay your rent. Your parents can just do this. In a lot of cases, campaigns will put you up in a stranger's house, which may be weird for a lot of people. I enjoyed it. I met some crazy people. I also met some wonderful friends and got to live in mansions next to Britney Spears. Like, what? As a volunteer, right?
Okay, tell me about that.
Right.
So what campaign was that, and where were you?
Okay, so I was working for the DCCC. For those of you who don't know, there's sort of the presidential level Democratic campaigns, and this happens on the Republican side too. Then there's the Senate, DSCC. Then there's the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Okay. So if you will, it's all the campaigns for the Congress all over the country, and they just sort of throw me somewhere and say, go there. So with a moment's notice, I got in my car in Colorado and drove to California working for the DCCC. So it was Obama's next run. Was I helping Obama? Sure, everything helps everything. But I was focused on 6 congressional races in California. So I stayed with 3 different groups of families, all just wonderful. But the one that was really crazy, and I'm still friends with her today, was a woman named Lori. She was volunteering for Julia Brownley in Congress, and someone said, yeah, can someone stay in your house? She said, sure. I showed up in this gated community in my crappy little VW with old Dean bumper stickers on it, poor just graduated college, law school type of thing. And yeah, I'm staying in a mansion. She gives me her Mercedes to use. She's like, yeah, that is blah, blah NBA player. That house is so-and-so. And that one's Britney Spears. And now I know Britney Spears has been in the news. She was not in the news at that time. So I should have gone over and said hi. But anyway, she had a hot tub that used to be, the house used to be owned by an NBA player. So the hot tub was 10 feet deep. It took like $200 and 5 hours to heat it. But my husband came to visit. He's a very tall man. He was like, this is the greatest. I'm never comfortable in hot tubs. So, I got to live there. because in California, there are a lot of rich Democrats who are very, very generous. So,
but there are rich Democrats who are very, very generous around the country, I would imagine.
There are fewer rich Democrats in New Mexico, I would say, like truly going to fundraise. Also, if we remember, California is like the third largest country in the world. If you think about it, you know what I mean? Or the third largest GDP, right? There's just more people.
Right.
But there are not tons and tons of movie stars in New Mexico with mansions. Like there aren't in the same way, you know?
So after the Massachusetts governor's campaign for which you got paid for, what is the next campaign that you were a paid campaign worker in?
Howard Dean in 2004. So the following 2 years. And for the most part, with the exception of 2020, where I had a lot of interviews, I've been able to find paid work every 2 to 4 years, no matter where I am in the country.
So when you decide to work for one campaign or the other, how are you making that choice?
The first thing I do when I am offered a job with a candidate is I just try to talk to anyone who has worked for or with them. Because regardless of who you are as a candidate, you might be terrible to work for. You might be amazing to work for. I love John Kerry very much. He's about as interesting as wallpaper, but he's fantastic to work for.
So it's within the network. This is not like an issue-based thing, but rather much more about network and where you are within the network, correct?
It is. And that's why I really do just think of it more as this team effort. You know, we can get very overwhelmed. This is my advice to people in politics at this moment. We get very overwhelmed. You know, the day that Roe was overturned, everyone was so overwhelmed. What are we going to do about every person in America? What are we going to do about the world that's looking? Sometimes you need to just focus on your own little hamlet. That's what I say, right? Not ignore the rest of the world, but try to do the most best, goodest thing you can do for one area, because we cannot do it all.
So what is interesting in what you say is that, you know, normal sort of people outside of politics, you know, think in issue terms, right? They care about education, or they care about healthcare, or they care about abortion. What is the difference you see between yourself and the civilians, so to speak?
Well, first of all, I'm very arrogant about what civilians think about politics, and I tell them they're wrong a lot. This is true. You know, first of all, people don't vote about issues. I know they wish they did. They don't. I would say maybe this vote, we'll see when all the numbers come out, that maybe Roe really affected some things. But with very, very, very few exceptions, a very slim margin of people do not vote on issues. Pretend all the Democrats agree on everything. There's still someone who's more suited to deal with security issues. There's still someone more suited to deal with education. There's still someone that's more passionate about LGBTQ issues or about the environment. And those, you only really get one or two big issues. David Trone, is he going to, you know, change all the abortion laws in the country? Well, I don't know that he's going to be the one to do that, but we need him elected to be able to accomplish what we need to accomplish. And for the most part, the party does a good job of, you know, if you get this person elected, we'll all figure this out together. I know it can look like a huge mess from afar, but I can work for almost any Democrat across the country and know that my basic stuff, what I care about, the sort of 10 things in my mind I couldn't imagine working for someone who didn't believe it. It's never even been a question. There's never been someone who didn't agree with those things on me. And I don't actually care, especially because I've been a carpetbagger and done this all over the country. This doesn't have, all these jobs will always end on today. I'm unemployed today. They will always end. So even if you're working for someone that you don't think is the greatest, if you think they're going to do the greatest for that state or for this country, you can work for them for 3 months.
So this is interesting. You believe that people do not vote based on issues.
Yes. Rarely.
What is your belief on how people vote?
They vote because I tell them to.
If that is truly the case, then why is so much of our political debate over issues?
Well, I think it's a couple different things. I have no problem with the fact or with the deliberateness and transactional nature of politics. I think it's actually like everywhere else in the world at any job, but I just think we're very clear about it. I've heard people say, I feel weird asking people for money or, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, you ask people for Girl Scout cookie money or you know, ask your boss for your paycheck. This is sort of the transactional nature of that. And what is part of that is, as an elected official, your first and foremost role above everything else is to stay elected. All of it falls from there. If you lose your election, you're done helping. to knock on 150 doors in a day, to make 300 phone calls a day for 6 straight months. That terrifies so many people. The idea of calling strangers, I was like, that is my favorite part, calling strangers. It's a ton of work to be involved in politics. What I like to say to people is, whether you like it or not, every single decision almost that you make in your life is political. You can just choose to know that or not, but where do you shop? Where do you choose to live? What school do you send your kids to? Do you get a rescue dog or do you buy a bred one, right? All of these things do have implications. It does matter whether or not there's enough money to put up a stop sign. All these little things, they are political. And I'm talking specifically to privileged white people right now. Just want to make that clear. As a privileged white person myself, it is a privilege to say I don't have to worry about politics. Because if your daughter was in jail, if your kid was being detained or taken away, put in a cage, during all of our immigration worries, you would care. You would suddenly be political, whether you like to be or not. I spent days and days of early vote this year in Maryland, standing at the polls for hours with teachers and firefighters. They do not want to be political. They want nothing to do with any of this. They don't even always know what they're talking about at the polls. They just want to do their job, but it is inherently political, whether you like it or not. Being a teacher is political. I don't understand why completely, but it is. When I worked, for those of you who know, in District 7, Jacqueline Manger, her husband is the current chief of police for the Capitol Police. He's never been on a ballot a day in his life, but he's one of the most political figures ever. He didn't get into politics. He just wants to be a cop. So is it that we hate it because it sucks and it's just the worst? It's like, dentists or, getting a colonoscopy, right? Some things are the worst, right?
Yeah, sewer workers, sanitary workers.
Totally. The best people, they work so hard, they should get paid, right? So is it that, or is it that we've learned we can't play that game? So many people, especially women, have been told this whole time, sit down, be quiet. This is not a place for you. And I have had the wonderful, very unique privilege of always walking into an election and going, no, I was born here. I'm meant to be here. And I have something to say. I've always assumed I was running for office.
Getting back to the history timeline. So did you work in Obama 2008?
Yes. So I was in law school and my second year, and my friends lured me. I was like, nope. I'm in law school. I'm not leaving. I was in Boston. So New Hampshire's only an hour drive. Nope. And I happened to have tickets to Madonna, which was amazing. I didn't have any money, but I bought them drunk one night. And anyway, but you got to see Madonna. I mean,
yeah.
I was like, I didn't have children then, but could I tell my children I missed Madonna? I had tickets to Jerry Garcia, so I just had to do it. So I'm at this show and my phone is ringing off the hook. We need you down in New Hampshire. We need you, Abby. Come on. And Madonna does this whole presentation. If you don't do everything you can to get this man, Barack Obama, elected, I hate you. Madonna guilt tripped me. And she put up this scary picture of John McCain with flames coming out of his head. And I went out in the parking lot and was like, okay, Madonna says I have to. And I showed up at the office in New Hampshire, and it was unbelievable because truly I had stepped out of it after Howard Dean and John Kerry. My heart was broken. We were still in the war. It was just a dark, dark time. And all the work I'd done was right there. And it was handing that to Barack Obama. I don't mean he didn't work for it, but what we built over the years. And the Dean campaign in 0304 was the first time that New Hampshire and subsequent states didn't just hand money to parties for the election. They gave them people. That's a culture wave shock because they were expecting a check and they got a little white girl. But that builds broader, deeper, more lasting power.
Why?
Because
let me just ask that question more clearly. Why does sending a quote unquote white girl to New Hampshire or to another state build a deeper infrastructure than giving money to the state or a party organization and them having to do it?
In the past, and there's two things going on here. One is the change in technology. So really around that Howard Dean, we were the first ones to use quote unquote social media, a little thing called Meetup that no one had heard of, right? So, it's just a case of you need the young people who know how to use the databases, who are trained. I'm a trained campaign staff professional. That wasn't always a job, nor did it need to be. Before, literally our voter rolls, when we were figuring out who to call, how to get people out, we would look through phone books, and maybe the Secretary of State would give us a hand printed out list of voters, right? By 2004, we were at a point where they were like, if we just hand this money to these local parties, and I'm talking generally, I've just seen this across the country, it's not any specific party, we don't know what they're going to do with it. Some state parties totally know. They get their butts in gear and they do ads or yards, whatever, they make a plan. And some people just spend money on dinners. I mean, if there's no accountability, there's no way to know. And it's not fair to think that this, maybe small town in Wisconsin would understand how to do voter projections and data totals or any of that kind of stuff. And most of these people working in state parties across the country, they have full-time jobs of their own. So I can be there.
But why shouldn't dinners matter? Because you talked a little bit earlier about how reaching out is the key determinant whether somebody votes or not. It's not the issues. I mean, you can do all kinds of issue ads and all of that, but those dinners in a small town may be all that's needed.
Possibly. But if my goal is simply to get people to the polls, anyone who'd show up to that dinner was already going to go to the polls anyway. Yes, there are reasons for it. There's motivation, there's planning, there's absolute power between people being in the same room, hearing the same thing at the same time. But I make it very clear to everybody, like, you'll get your space back on November 9th, right? Like, I'm just doing this for one goal. And why aren't we doing this or that? Because it doesn't get me votes, because it doesn't get me votes. It's so cool. I don't know if it's my super obsessed ADHD brain, but it's so nice at certain times in life when life is so confusing to have an unbelievably specific focus with a deadline like no other. No matter what happened last night, it was going to be over today. It was going to be over no matter what happened. And when people can get in that mindset, you just kind of have to build this machine of, knocking doors, reaching, not even just having a dinner. You have got to literally reach out to thousands. There's not enough seats at a table to bring this many people to the dinner. And the specific people you need to get are the people who don't want to listen to you, who don't want to come to a dinner, who hate politics. And you have to convince them, I get it, but I really love my kids' school, don't you? Okay, can you just hold your nose and vote, please?
So one of the things that a lot of people have complained to me in the election cycle is that they get too many communications, too many reach outs from campaigns, right? And you're saying that reach out is the one that is going to convert those that don't want to be converted to your cause. Is that a reasonable expectation?
So if the cause, quote unquote, is get them to the polls, yes. Right? If the cause is not to convince them of my opinion, that's a very different thing. If you call too much and say, no, agree with me, that's not going to work. Right? If we're talking a persuasion situation. If we're literally just talking, my favorite letters, GOTV, which stands for get out the vote. If you ever say that to any elected official, they will know what it is. My favorite time of the year. If it's just for get out the vote, what we have the technology to do is Maryland's pretty good. Colorado's very good. Within a few hours that you voted, you're taken off the roll. We don't call you anymore. So literally, we're just calling you because you haven't gotten in your vote. I say that to people all the time. You've called me 6 times. I have my ballot right here. The second you put that ballot in the mail, we don't want to call you anymore, right?
But how do you know that they've put the ballot in the mail?
So now that we have that technology, and that's what I'm talking about, really specifically, it's this thing called the VAN or Vote Builder. It's had a couple different names throughout the years. And I just happened to be that first campaign in 2002 was with the guy who would eventually build the Vote Builder as it is today, which everyone knows it is the gold standard. I had a long talk with a Republican of how jealous they are that we have Google, they have Yahoo. Like, that's what it's like. And it's just going to take years to build up. Most of the less sophisticated campaigns without the money to buy into VAN, it's not cheap. Or on the Republican side, they just don't have the technology or the expertise.
Maryland VAN is $600. I mean, really.
Well, it depends on the level that you need it. But yes. No, it's not. $600 isn't nothing. You know what I mean? I wouldn't necessarily pay for it if it was a really small rate.
But if you can't raise $600 in a campaign, what are you campaigning for?
I mean, I feel like you just said a mouthful. Yeah. I would ask that same question. We established a way in '04 to do this, and it's not going to go anywhere. And we're not moving towards more yard signs. We're moving towards more Facebook and Instagram ads, because no matter how much people love their yard signs or bumper stickers, there's nothing more helpful than knowing, for instance, with the ads we bought in the primary, 20,000 people will see this 10 times in the next 2 days. I'll guarantee their eyeballs will see your logo. You can't do that in any other way to get that much. And the funny part about this, I know I said this to you yesterday, so I'm 42, almost 43 years old. The population in the United States is almost exactly 50% is older than me and 50% is younger than me. The 50% older than me does not know how much they're being manipulated. Like, that's what's bad. I have these conversations with older candidates, older volunteers. No, we need the yard signs. I don't even look at those ads on Facebook. And I'm like, no, you don't realize you're looking at those ads on Facebook. I know you are, because you don't see the ads. Like, you don't realize that it's happening all the time. The younger generation has completely accepted it. They know they're being marketed to. They know they're merely an algorithm. They're totally down with it.
What did you do for David Trone campaign?
Call volunteers, put them in slots. Just basically, I came in for the get out the vote part. I came in for the last 5 weeks, get people at the polls during early vote, people knocking doors, making phone calls, real basic.
Wait, explain how you do that.
You're on the phones, you're knocking doors. Anybody that has said they support the campaign, anybody that's ever cut the hair of the candidate or their dog walker or whatever it is, you just ask everyone, and you will be shocked at the people that will come out of the woodwork and help you. It will not be who you think. Some people will really disappoint you. It's almost like during your wedding. It's like some people are super helpful and some people are annoying, and it's not the people you thought they were necessarily going to be. So you ask them and you just say the most effective thing we can do, the thing that we've always done better than the Republicans and that they are decades behind on us, is just go to your neighbors, go to these people. And because we have this wonderful voter file, you can go, I know everything about you. I know your age. I know when you voted. I know who you voted for. I know your Facebook information. So that sounds creepy to so many people. It makes me feel good when I say, okay, I didn't know where my neighbor stood, but I know that she voted Democrat the last 3 times. Well, now I feel empowered to go over. And yes, you might find out the woman's age. Heaven forbid. We know how old people are. Like, whatever. People get weird about stuff.
Abi Green, thank you for taking the time the morning after. Rest up. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Sunil. This is wonderful. Thanks for having me.
What lessons can we draw from my conversation with veteran campaign worker Abi Green? First, there's clearly selection bias in who takes on campaign work. Abi says that she absolutely loves this kind of work, including things that others may dislike. Cold calling strangers, the crazy hours, the frenetic pace, picking up and moving to different jobs and even different places. These are things that regular folks hate, usually. But there are some like Abi Green who relish it. When you find one of these folks, hold on to them because they will bring perspective to your life and they will tell you war stories. If you know campaign workers who can't get home on holidays, be sure to have them over for dinner. Second, campaign work, like any other field, has its own expertise and knowledge. From Abi Green's perspective, it is not issues that wins elections, but her reaching out to you. This could be a call or a knock on the door, but there is a method to the madness. At least on the Democratic side, the Voter Action Network, the VAN, is an incredible tool that marries publicly available information about voters with geography and online data to create a really clear picture of where Democratic voters are located. There is expertise also in understanding what you're asking. You're not trying to win issue debates, but you're calling people to ask them to go vote. With issues, you get into arguments. With going to vote, you're turning out voters, and many of them will vote based on name recognition rather than issue knowledge. This kind of thinking may lead you to hate politics even more, but really every field of human action has its own internal rules. Politics is just pervasive in a way that it won't leave you alone. Third, the end of elections, fairly conducted, brings relief. No more mailers, no more commercials, no more calls, no more door knocks. Perhaps a party to celebrate if our candidate has won. All of this gives democracy an episodic feel. It is what you do every 2 years, and then in between, you focus on the rest of your life. This is simply incorrect. The end of elections is the start of the work of democracy in other ways that we don't even recognize. We vote with our feet. We vote with our pocketbook. We petition. We testify. We name. We shame. What gets left out often is organizing. We need to do more of that. The beauty of democracy is that no loss is permanent. No victory either. This gives politics the character of a game. That's intentional. That's all for this episode. You've been listening to I Hate Politics. I am Sunil Dasgupta. Music for this episode comes from A Shrewdness of Apes, a Washington, D.C. area progressive rock band that has been a finalist for the local Whammy Awards in the hard rock category. Ian Mabley on vocals and guitar, Chris Shadow on vocals and bass, and J.R. Franks on the drums. More information at their website, asoaband.com. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at ihppod@gmail.com or reach out on Twitter at ihppod. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.
The sickness of the world. Smokestacks drilling car exhaust, chipping away